This is work with Dong Yako and Yu Zheng. They were students in WashU, so they are pretty much, this is a pretty much WashU product paper, all right? Okay, so for those of you who are not aware of it, this fantasy that we have of a constancy of labor share is kind of gone, all right? So I'm gonna show you data, I'm gonna show you many types of labor share. The labor share is going down, right? So this has, we're not the first one documenting this, we're gonna provide a rationale for it. So basically 2 points of this paper that I want you, hopefully, I wanna convince you to take away is that the decline is twice as large as what has been previously documented. You now go to NEPA data, compute labor share, and that decline is twice as big as what we were to compute a couple of years ago. And I'm gonna tell you exactly why. And the second point that I want to make is that we can entirely explain, in an accounting sense, right? This is a measurement, an accounting paper. We can entirely explain that decline with intellectual property products capital. All right? Simple as that. So let me go through it. So obviously, we're not the first ones talking about the labor share decline. Elsby, Homing, Sahin have a very nice paper studying the BLS labor share. Karabor, Boris Nyman look at the corporate sector, corporate labor share for many countries, and then we have also Piketty, right? So for those of you who had the pleasure or unpleasure, or very few of you, according to Fatih, of reading that book, so the second part of the book basically relies on inequality, documents facts on inequality, but the first part of the book actually talks about labor share, right? So then he tries to put the two things together, okay? So let's see if that makes sense at the end of the talk. Okay, so I'm gonna take a standard computation of labor share. I'm gonna be, telling you more details about it, but this is the Cooley-Prescott labor share, where we basically take the part of labor or the part of income that is ambiguous, that we cannot unambiguously attribute to labor or capital, and then we split it by the same amount than the part of the economy that it's unambiguous, all right? If you were to do this with pre-revision data, so NEPA had a big revision in 2013 that introduced R&D as capital, as investment. I'm gonna go through it in a bit. But if you were to do that before 2013, you would get the pink line. All right, so that's labor share before the last revision. So that's a labor share that has been studied in the literature. All right, so it starts basically at 0.68, it goes down to maybe 0.64. All right, so there are some issues on where is it that the decline starts. Here I'm just plotting a trend through the entire period, but we can maybe argue that it starts in 75. We can perhaps discuss that, maybe it starts in the 2000s. I'm gonna go in detail about that later. Now, if you compute labor share right now using the most updated data set of the National Income Products Account, you get the blue line. Again, you start close to 0.68, but it goes down a bit much more, right? So instead of 0.64, it goes basically to 0.60. So it's close to roughly twice as big as before.
So
okay?
Is it just my illusion, or does most of the difference come before 70? I mean, it looks like the gap remains. Is that right?
Now the gap is going to increase. So you're going to see the gap is very minor here.
I see that. What I'm saying is, if you look at 1970,
yes,
that gap is much smaller than, say, in 2007.
Yes. So software is going to kick in the 1970s. That's going to explain a lot. Software. So let me tell you what IPP is. Okay, so let's go through it. So I'm going to tell you the revisions. I'm going to tell you exactly where it's included in each of these ones, right? So there have been, like in the last 15 years, 2 main revisions that actually address investment, or the way we account, or the way we introduce capital expenditures in national income accounts. Before 1999, that is before software was introduced as capital, all the IPP items, so intellectual property products, this is software, this is R&D, and this is artistic originals. Artistic originals is something we can neglect, but it's basically software and R&D. IPP items were treated as expenditures in intermediate non-durable goods. That means that they don't add value, right? So they wash away, all right? So there is no amount of labor or capital that is attributed to the production of these two. In 1999, we capitalized software. That implies that now we have, in 1999, we started to have an investment account that actually accumulated software in the fixed asset tables. We didn't have that before 1999. In 2003, the second largest revision in this context, we introduced R&D. So R&D wasn't capitalized before. Now you look at the fixed asset tables, and you basically have 3 accounts. You have structures, you have equipment, and you have IPP. And IPP includes software, which we had since 1999. It includes R&D, and it also includes artistic originals. These revisions obviously have consequences for investment, have consequences for capital, and have consequences for output, because you're going to increase capital income.
So,
yes?
So just to clarify, so suppose I had a company and I just own the Viagra patent, and I get that stream. So that would have been computed as what before these changes?
So that would be, so you make profits out of that.
Yeah.
That would go to capital income before. So there is part of the rental income that comes from patents and stuff like that, licenses, that was already included. So all the software, all the profits that MATLAB makes, all the profit that all these guys make was already part of capital income. The big chunk that it's new is going to be depreciation. So it was not capital, right? So therefore it didn't go to consumption of fixed capital. So a big chunk of it is going to be the depreciation of those assets. They were not in NIPA. It was absent.
What do you mean by depreciation of those assets? You mean obsolescence replaced by other idea? What is it?
So I don't mean that they were not in the economy. In the economy, IPP has always been there. All that I'm saying is that the way we accounted for it in NIPA was ignoring the fact that these guys get obsolete and get depreciated. So if you look, for example,
not the physical depreciation, but the obsolete part as well.
So depreciation in the context of R&D and software is not so easy as measuring depreciation of buildings, right? So NIPA has its own way of estimating these things. So basically, they rely on second markets to get most of that information. The depreciation rates that they get, I'm going to show you some numbers for example, software are very high, are around 40%, compared to the ones that we will get for structures, which is less than 10%.
But is this a statement as if you say depreciation rates went from 1 to 40%, from 100 to 40%?
I'm going to show you that. Yeah, let me show you the numbers.
And another thing is like R&D. How is that observed? How does
R&D is easy.
classified?
R&D is easy. All the balance sheets. You can go to Compustat and you have the R&D expenditures. What matters is that before they wouldn't go into investment, so they would be considered as expenditures in intermediate non-durables. So that wouldn't add to value, right? So that wouldn't go to output, net output, right?
To be sure I understand it, the measure of the return of IPP is net of depreciation, the one that you use to compute the labor share.
In the past, yes. Most of it, yes.
In your picture there.
In the picture, no. That's going to be included, but that's going to make a difference. So
it may be that there is a decline of the labor share because there is more depreciation.
part of it is going to be depreciation, part of it is going to be the price of investment changes a little bit, and part of it is going to be that suddenly you have a new flow of capital. You have a new flow of capital. For any given depreciation rate, it also increases the. That's the key. This is it. It's just a measurement issue.
And they did have all the historical data to go back and update all the series.
They updated everything.
Okay.
Now we can argue if they did that well or not, right? So all that I'm showing is what they did. Okay.
But how much of the decline may be just the fact that when you go back to the past, you're not getting everything. You're getting less and less. You see what I mean? And today you have all the information. You have to rebuild information in the past. If information were not there, then you don't have it. Then you observe a decline because your measurement error was huge at the beginning. Then you're getting little of what it was.
So in that sense, I think it's pretty safe what they do in the sense that, and it's pretty safe. In terms of what happened historically, right? So R&D has always been measured in those balance sheets, even in the past, even if you go to the 50s. And software was just not there in the 50s. It's something that starts to be in the 70s, 75. So maybe if you go to the 20s, then we might have an issue. I'll go show you data in the 20s as well.
Is there any change on the tax?
It's pretty flat. So whether you do this with
Of these items.
of this,
For the firm to declare where is.
I'm gonna. That's a good question. I don't know. So what matters for this measurement is going to be the tax on production and subsidies, and that I know it's pretty flat for the U.S. It's actually it doesn't change much the definition or the behavior of labor share. It has been around that taxes and subsidies might explain part of the decline, but actually if you look at the European data, they have to be like they didn't change that much the trends, at least from the data that we're using from national income accounts.
But for taxation purposes, was there a difference with respect to IPP for software and I guess that's the question, whether when they introduced the 99 division, then and the 2013, then firms want to declare more because they have to pay less taxes because they can account for depreciation.
Yeah,
That's
a good point. I don't know. I should look at it. That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay. So let me start to do the decomposition. So let me tell you first how we see that investment behaves and how big IPP is in the economy. This actually includes residential investment. The green line is structures. As a total of aggregate investment, they add up to 1. Equipment is relatively flat. And you see IPP. So IPP is a rising investment item. Basically goes to 35 or so. This is including residential investment. If I remove residential investment, IPP goes to 40%. I mean, it's not trivial. If I look at the corporate sector, it goes to closer to 45. If I look at manufacturing, it goes to above 65%. I mean, it's not a not trivial amount of aggregate investment.
Do you have the levels of this? Does the investment level flattens after 2000, right? So IPP, does it still go up?
Yeah, it has to, because the share is going, I guess. Yeah, it has to.
The
The total is flatty, right? But
I'm just curious because some of these IPP recently are being attributed to foreign affiliates for tax reasons, and I want to see if that, counterfactually makes it look like IPP is not going up, because Apple actually has a subsidiary in Bermuda which gets all the rents from IPP.
I should check the levels.
But
Yeah.
if I understand the new measure of the investment share has to be going up. If when you don't include IPP, the investment share is constant, but you add it now to investment.
And the last years, I don't know. I mean, I think what Fatih is saying is that it's including that is kind of flatty. I don't know. I would check the level in the last 10 years or so.
That's the share in investment. The share in the stock of capital must be tiny if the depreciation is that much.
The shock is going to be smaller. It's going to be around 8%, but that explains the decline for labor share, most of it, right? Okay, so it's a not trivial amount of investment. Okay, so let me tell you exactly how we see that we do the accounting. So ideally, one would like to have an account in NIPA that basically divides the wage bill and rental income, depreciation, etc., for IPP only. If that were the case, if we actually had that account, like an industry, if we had an industry of IPP, we could actually disentangle how much of the factor share, aggregate factor share, is attributed to the changes in the factor share of IPP itself on a composition, right? Unfortunately, we don't have this thing. Okay, so there is not an industry called IPP. All right, so we have to come up with a way of doing this, and the most simple way that we come up is this. So basically, we define labor share as the rate of return, gross rate of return, capital, and output. There are going to be 3 channels. So I'm going to use an investment model as an accounting device. There are going to be 3 channels in which that labor share can change due to IPP. So it's going to change aggregate investment, right? So that's going to change the stock of capital. It's going to change the price of investment, and it's going to change the depreciation rate. These 3 are going to affect how fast K accumulates. Now, the interest rate, the rate of return, is also going to be affected by prices and depreciation rates through the standard investment model. And what that means is that the capital income is going to be affected by APP, and therefore output is going to be affected by APP. All right? Simple accounting.
So I still not understand what I asked before. So I thought if I'm the Viagra company, right, then I would have before having a tiny capital stock, just my office maybe, right? And you don't count the patent, so you would see me with my huge profits, right? So you would just look at that as a big R, I think, right? In the data. So you would still attribute that to capital, I said, right? You said. So
So
how can it matter in the end?
So that R, what is that? So what is the gross rate of return? It's going to be the net. It's going to be a small r. It's going to be a depreciation, and it's going to be adjustment by prices. Okay. What I'm saying is that in the past, your Viagra rental income, let's say that you license that, you're renting, you're getting money for that. That would go into capital income only in terms of the small r. The depreciation of it wouldn't go. It's just not accounted for. The changes in the price of investment attributed to the price of investment of your Viagra pill were not in the national accounts either. Okay, but there were firms, MATLAB was there, Microsoft was there, and they were selling products, and those profits were there. Okay? Now most of the decline is going to come through depreciation and through the new flow of capital. Okay? That was not taken into account. All right? Okay, so I'm going to construct labor share. I'm going to follow Cooley-Prescott, basically Kruger or Gomen-Rupert. So what this basically means is what I told you before, which is I'm going to take the chunk of ambiguous capital income to be in proportion identical to the chunk of capital income that is unambiguous. All right? So I can be more precise on that, but I guess we all follow this. Okay, and this is labor share.
Which fraction is the ambiguous?
Sorry?
How large is the ambiguous part?
It's like 20, 25. Most of it is proprietor's income. Okay. So I told you I don't have an IPP account. So I cannot go and disentangle the part of labor share that is attributed to IPP directly from the data. But I have the depreciation. So the fixed asset tables have investment, I have depreciation by type of capital. So I can go to the blue line, which is always the same across all these graphs, which is labor share right now, and I can remove depreciation attributed only to IPP. Okay, that's going to be part of the story, not the full story. Okay, it's going to be part of the story. So if I do that, I already get some action. All right, so if I just remove that from the account, kind of get closer to the pink line that I had before, right? So that gives me the orange line, which basically accounts for, if I get the numbers right, 65% of the total decline. Okay? Now, as I said before, that's not the entire effect of IPP because it affects prices, it affects accumulation of capital too. That affects the capital income not generated by depreciation itself. So I'm going to have to account for this. So this is what I do now. So the way I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the definition of labor share that I had before. And each of these items, I'm going to see what happens to them, investment, price, and depreciation, with and without IPP. Right? So these are the only three channels. Remember, it's just accounting. These are the only three channels through which IPP affects total income. So on the left, you have investment. On the right, you have the price. And here you have depreciation. These are the three channels. You can see investment in blue. This is the current investment. It's always blue, it's always data. If I remove IPP, I get the orange line. Basically, that implies an increase of 30% of total investment due to IPP. Interestingly, the price barely changes. If I remove from the computation of the price of investment IPP, so the price of software, the price of R&D, and the price of artistic originals, the price of investment basically falls by the same amount. Blue is the data. Orange is if I remove IPP from the data. All right, so this is a Tornquist index. Okay, there are different ways of doing this. We get similar results. The red line is the ratio, basically 97. So it's barely a decline of 3%. Okay, that tells us that things that we know, perhaps we didn't know so well, but the price of investment is basically driven by equipment. All right?
Big swing.
There is a slowdown here. That's the level, but yeah.
Isn't that goes contrary all this evidence by Violante?
No, that's equipment.
That's all equipment.
That's equipment, remember. That's
software.
But software does not matter too much.
That's your message, basically.
It's not my message. It's their message. It's their message too. It's the data, but it's their message too.
How do they measure R&D prices?
They don't have R&D prices.
They have to impute it.
You mean NIPA or Gianluca? NIPA.
NIPA.
They use usually secondary markets for this.
You mean patent?
Yeah.
Patent sales.
So is
Yeah.
part of
I
it
mean-
just more patenting?
That has increased. I don't know if that is
That doesn't mean that there's more R&D if there's more patents.
well, that's a different thing, right? So this is just investment. It could be good or bad, right? So it could be something I failed in, like I invested and it didn't turn out to be anything useful. That would still be. It's like in this sense, what NIPA is doing is I also learn from my mistakes. Maybe that's not the right way to do it. I'm not defending that's the right way to do it. I'm just saying this is how they do it now, and that's what explains the decline in labor share. We might think there are better ways of incorporating R&D. Yeah.
No, but the point is that they share the same decline rate. It's not that they are irrelevant, it's that the price is declining at the same rate that the other prices. That's what you observe there.
Yes. Well, no, I mean, I didn't. This is.
It's slightly different.
This is so software. If you plot, in the paper I have it, I don't have. If you plot software, it actually declines a little bit faster, like in the 70s. Okay. Now R&D doesn't. The price of R&D is pretty flat, and this is basically it's just the composition of the two. So at the end of the day, you come with a price that is not particularly relevant. And this is the depreciation rate. Again, this is a composition effect of software and R&D. So if you plot the depreciation rate right now, go to the fixed asset tables, take depreciation of total capital and divide that by total capital. You get the blue line. Depreciation is not constant. You go to NIPA right now, depreciation is not constant. All right? This is the depreciation rate from NIPA. It goes basically, increases from, 0.4 to 1.2 or something like that. Now you remove IPP, we come back to the things that we knew.
Sorry,
Blue is data right now. This is depreciation.
it goes from 0.4 to 0.65.
Yes, so this is the ratio of the two, an increase of 30%.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is annual 4% to annual
Yes.
6.5.
Yes. So basically you get, and you remove IPP, you come back to what we knew or what we know in terms of structures and equipment. Now what I'm saying is like, if you go to NIPA to compute, you tell your students, go on NIPA to get the Caldor facts, watch out. All right? Because they are not there anymore, right? If we include IPP in the national income account, it's just not there anymore. Okay. Now that I have the three components, I can use a simple investment model to remove all of it. The thing that I did before is I went to the actual depreciation and remove it. I cannot go to an IPP account. I need to use a model. So just take a model. I just need this to be the constant returns to scale. Certainly not Cobb-Douglas, but something that creates movements in, it could be a CS, but I don't need to justify the value of the sigma right now. You have aggregate investment, which is investment and the price, the inverse of the price, and then you have accumulation. It's just accounting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change what it's in orange. I'm going to change the price without IPP. I'm going to change the investment, and I'm going to change the delta. That's going to give me an alternative series of K, right? Different price, different investment, different delta, an alternative series of K. That's one element of the capital share.
So alternative to what?
Alternative to the data. So I compute labor share in the data, right? Now, if I changed investment flow, remove IPP. If I change the price of investment, remove IPP.
Okay.
If I change the delta, remove IPP. It's just accounting. I said at the beginning, this is an accounting exercise. We're trying to understand why is it that NIPA behaves this way, not Caldor friendly anymore, okay? So that would change the capital. Now labor share also depends on the rate, right? The rate of return.
Oh, that's what you need to use the production function.
Yes, that's when I need this.
Can you go back one slide? I think I'm still a little bit confused about the concept of depreciation for the IPP. So, it's not that it's the obsolete that you emphasize.
Yeah.
So for the obsolete, it doesn't really reduce the output when it depreciates. It's just that maybe people don't want to buy it anymore. So in this accounting exercise, like a machine depreciate, we really say it's less useful in the production. But for a software depreciate, obsolete, it's just that there's a better software, but you could still use the old software to produce the same amount of goods.
This is not denying that, right? So this is totally agnostic about that. So this is measuring the income part. It's not the production part, but you can think of measuring upward from the income side. All that I'm saying is that in the past, that income side, the way NIPA provided the data, didn't measure this obsolescence. That was not there. So that part of capital income that goes to these things that get obsolete was just not there. Now it is there. And I'm saying that it has consequences for the aggregate ratios that we believe or that we think are there. But I agree with you. But this is absent of agnostic of anything that might be going on from the production side.
So I think maybe a lot of these questions, including I have similar ones, in our mind, it's not super clear. We teach this in the first year micro class, right? About the GDP accounting, where goes what, how it goes. Then we forget that we're not here. So I think it would be useful to start with that.
Maybe.
And show us, if it's capital, it's counted here.
That's because you're not teaching macro anymore. Yes.
If it's expense, it's an intermediate good, so it's treated differently.
Good point. So I change the capital series. I can change the rate of return, and for that I need a production function. And now I know that this is basically, if I get rid of the price of investment, I get the standard, R delta, right? Now the price creates this funny thing, okay? I allow for this price to change with time, and definitely the depreciation rate to change with time too, okay? I can back out this R from the data.
The depreciation, you have it.
Depreciation, I have it. This is data. The investment, I have it. The only thing that I don't have is a small r. The only thing that I have, because I'm not solving the model, is the small r, right? So I can say that the way I choose the r is a bit innocuous. It's totally innocuous, because I can go to the pre-99 data, get an r. I can go to the post-2013, get an r, very similar. That means that the net rate of return that comes out of NIPA, it's independent of IPP. Okay, so I plot that r. That's the way I get the r. Okay, otherwise I would need to solve the model. We'll agree on that. Okay. Now I have R, and R can be with IPP or without IPP, because I can change the price and I can change the depreciation rate. So I change capital income, and therefore I change total income as well. All right, so now I can do the exercise of removing entirely IPP from the national accounts.
So that means one thing. So there you get the R with the production function, and now you need the VT and the VT plus 1.
This is data, 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 data. And this data can have IPP or not. This is data. I show you the data. Remember, this is the data. The blue is the data currently with IPP. The orange is the data without IPP. There are different ways of computing this. We're using torque and you get similar things. Now what I'm doing is I'm using an investment model, simple thing as you can get.
But then you go back, you plug this K in the next slide. You compute this K, you're going to plug the K in the marginal product of capital, and then you're going to get an R. In equation 3.
Yes. No, wait a second. Good point, okay? So I have 3. This R is basically a function of the price, the delta, and the small r, okay? I can go back here. I have capital from the data, output from the data, I have labor share. The only unknown here is the small r. What I'm saying is I can go back to pre-99 data without IPP, get an R. I can go to the post-2013, get an R. Innocuous. It's like the net one, it's independent of doesn't affect much, it's not affected by IPP. So now I'm in the position of entirely removing IPP from the account, okay? Again, this is the data. Now if I remove IPP from the accounts, we get a relatively flat line. So this would be a world, basically the world that NIPA would show us if in 1999 they had decided not to include software and not to include R&D in 2013. If we were in a national accounting world of the pre-1999 era, we would have a line like this. Labor share relatively flat with fluctuations, business cycle fluctuations. The entire decline, this is data. I'm matching the data. And I think about the simple, I think about this simple exercise that we're actually looking at the data itself. It's powerful as this, right? I remove this, I get the orange line. Now I removed everything. I remove the delta, I remove the price, I remove the flow. I can decompose this, right? This is the message.
The point is that you observe that
blue.
That the labor share has an unbalanced behavior. It goes down, it's not constant. Because on the demand side, there is this IPP that has a trend too.
Yes.
Right, and you have an unbalanced behavior of the aggregate that generates an unbalanced behavior of the share. That's
yes. So I can show you exactly now what is it. So the capital output ratio without IPP would be relatively constant. With IPP, it's going to go up. So it's kind of the Caldor facts are there in the background if we remove IPP, but IPP is creating all these distortions. Okay. I'm not going to say distortions. Maybe this is a better world. Yeah. Maybe this is a better. I believe this is a better depiction of the world, right? So
this is a bit like Prescott's point about intangible capital, right? That the firms are accumulating it and we were mismeasuring. until recently. That's fine. I mean, I'm just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're clashing a little bit, and you know, I made.
No, but that's not quite right.
Because in Prescott world labor share is constant.
No, I mean, there are examples recently where.
So it's still very confusing. So here the software is expenditure you spend on buying software or developing software?
It's both. You can outsource it, you can do it in-house. Most of it is done in-house. You go to Google, I mean, 65% of the total capital expenditures is in R&D. You go to Amazon, 80%.
Why is it all, don't you have to hire people to do the software? So where does that go?
Yeah. So the wages that R&D workers received, that was already there before. That was already before. All that I'm saying is that the revision right now, most of it, what it's accounting for, is for the depreciation that was not there.
Yeah,
And the changes in the price of investment.
It's really confusing.
No, but not only. Because if it were depreciation,
No, part of the output you make
So you're saying
goes
all
to
the
pay for the...
expenditure.
I should do this
Is it
one-on-one thing.
gross
All
and
the,
net?
all the expenditure on the software developer, the scientist, is already in the labor share. Now, the revision is to add.
It capitalizes that investment. Okay? It was expenditures, it
So
was
it
intermediate good.
didn't reclassify it out. It's still there in the labor
It's
share.
in the economy, it's always there. In the computation of the labor share, things change. Okay? In the past, the wages that R&D guys, were receiving, they were already there and they are still there. But the part of the rents that come from that capitalized asset that you have, which is R&D now, the Viagra pill that he was mentioning, so part of that capital income was not in the national accounts. What was not in the national accounts? Most of it, depreciation. So these things get obsolete. That goes to capital income. It was not there before.
Basically, this increased the capital income.
Yeah,
How you
that's
do
it.
it. It's
That-
not like labor income changed. It's just
It-
the capital income increased.
the labor income did not change. The labor share does. Because total income goes up.
no, but I think at the end what is relevant is the labor share
Because the whole point
when income is measured in net, not in gross.
I don't know. I mean,
No, of course, welfare is related to consumption and to net investment,
Yeah.
not to gross investment. Because depreciation is just you are compensated for rent.
But he's not making any statement about welfare.
I'm not. And that's the key, right? That's the key. I'm talking about production, most of it.
What I want to say is that I observe there something that is unbalanced.
Yes.
Oh my God, that complicates my life. But I observe another thing that is balanced. And I think the good way of measuring things is a balanced one. Then okay.
I mean,
That's
I mean, one message you can get out of this is that if your model doesn't have IPP, a trendless labor share, it's fine. Now, be aware that you're ignoring maybe 40% of aggregate investment, which might matter.
If you're investing more because you're depreciating more, who cares? The only thing that matters is net investment, right? Then I would like to see the net investment share of GDP and the gross one.
Exactly.
I think that there is something unbalanced in the gross, but the net is balanced. Then it's great, and it doesn't matter.
So can I ask this? I think we.
I don't agree with that. It would make sense if I make a statement of welfare, but it doesn't make sense if I make a statement of production.
Okay, but then
The solo model has
welfare
depreciation.
The welfare statement is only net investment matter. Gross investment.
I didn't say the word welfare. It didn't come out from my mouth.
So something related. I think.
10 minutes, okay,
When you first said, you sort of say Cobb-Douglas production function is not good.
I didn't say that.
Oh.
So let me continue. We'll get back to
You
that.
say that because
I
you
didn't.
said that's not good.
No,
I didn't say that.
You want it to be...
I didn't assume anything about the production function. Okay, this is just measurement. I'm telling you prices, depreciation. I didn't say any of that. Okay, so anyway, so the main finding here, it's simple, right? The secular decline can be entirely explained by IPP capital. Okay, I can go to 29, same thing happens. Okay, one thing that I can do, I mean, we do plenty of robustness, so let me just show you one perhaps. So I can go to the vintage data. Right? So I can go basically to a world where only software was capitalized, then basically test whether this investment model that we have is able to account for the decline when only software was present. I can use that as an external validation. The pink line is the pink line that everybody had studied before. If I just remove software, I get the green line. So the model in terms of trend, it's a little bit of fluctuations a little bit, but the model in terms of trend really matches what is going on in the data. I can go to the pre-99 era and basically compute labor share. I don't need to do it because Greenwood thought these guys did it for me. So I just plot what this guy did. So go make Greenwood 1995 using labor share. Labor share was flat at that point. We can go to the St. Louis Fed and basically go use the historical, the vintage data they have released in 1998 and compute labor share, and we get the same labor share as Greenwood and Gomez. Okay? So that tells us that this change in the accounting is driving this. Okay? All right. We get this from the simple investment model, same insights from the vintage data. We do many decompositions and robustness exercise, so maybe I can show you one or two. Okay, let's look at, for example, the decomposition between software, R&D, and artistic originals. So I start with the orange line that doesn't have IPP. I add software, and then suddenly my line becomes green. You can see that basically over here there is no change. The changes start in the 70s. Okay? Most of the decline, particularly before, and a big chunk of the total decline right now, it's also still R&D. Right now, R&D and software basically account for the same amount of the decline. Okay? So orange, no IPP, green, software, blue with R&D. Okay? So the change in the composition of what's driving this is changing with time. We look at housing, we look at private versus government. One simple way of dealing with this is to look at the corporate sector, all right, which is what Karabarbonis-Naiman did. So this is, again, the investment shares, basically goes to almost 40%. IPP, this is just the corporate sector. The blue line, this is the data from Karabarbonis-Naiman, which is the data that you get from NIPA. And what they basically show is a decline, or they discuss a decline starting in the 70s. All right? Now, if I remove IPP, I go to the orange line. That decline from the 70s is gone. Okay? Now, remember, the story that Karabarbonis-Naiman had in mind is the price of investment. Okay? I can go back a little bit. The price of investment. If you look at, what we are saying here is that if I remove IPP, labor share is flat, but remember the price of investment is still declining because equipment is there. So the price of investment is not driving labor share down. Not at all. At least in the US, the way we're saying it, not at all. All right? And this is consistent with the papers that we had at that time. Greenwood, Herkovitz, Krusell, Ohanian. So these guys introduced the price of investment, and at that time labor share was constant. Why? Man, they were looking at data from before the 99 revision. They didn't even have software at that time. Okay? And that's consistent with the findings right now. Okay? All right, so I can do this by industry. Okay? These are the 6, I think these are the main 12 industries. So these are the industries for which IPP grows: information, services, manufacturing. The numbers are too small, but you can see manufacturing goes up to 60%. Information goes to 60%. So some industries have a lot of IPP. So we can use this cross-sectional variation to understand if labor share is also going down where IPP capital intensity goes up. There are many ways of doing this. We can run many regressions. Maybe one simple way to show you what's going on is just to plot this, which is labor share on the vertical axis, IPP capital intensity, which is the ratio of IPP capital divided by total capital. If I put investment, we get the same thing. IPP capital divided by total capital by industry. And then I look at changes. So basically what we did here is we took the average before 1999 and then took the average after. All right, so green before, orange after. And you can see that there are guys that don't invest in IPP capital, agricultural, mining, transportation. There are guys that actually invest a lot. And it's for those that labor share goes down the most. We're talking about manufacturing, we're talking about services, we're talking about information. Okay? Look at durable. Labor share went down by more than 10%, close to 15%. The capital intensity in basically 10 years, on average, went up, also 10%. Okay? Look at non-durable too.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
With respect to your small r.
Small r, yes.
Because you said that having taken into account or not taking into account this especially with the GPUs, in the data given change the arc.
Yeah.
How can that be? Because you have a lot more capital after the change than before the change.
The depreciation and the investment change. So that takes most of the care of the change in the gross rate of return. So remember, the gross rate of return is not only the small r, but it's the price and depreciation. It's true you have more capital, but it depreciates much faster too. Okay? Maybe you should plot those two graphs. But I'm telling you, you go to I think it's in the paper, you go to before 1999, compute the R, go after, basically the same. Okay? They even have the same fluctuations. Okay? This is just data from NIPA. Okay? Now we can argue whether that's well constructed or not, but that's not what I'm discussing here.
What do you have in information?
Sorry?
What sectors do you have in information?
Uh,
For example, do you have computer manufacturing?
I think we have them all.
No, but like computer manufacturing, is it on the manufacturing or on the information?
I don't know. I will have to look. They behave similarly though, the manufacturing and the information. Information has a lower labor share, but it's an increase. I could look at that. What are you after?
No, we have a similar decomposition, but the information could be software publishing, it could be computer manufacturing, it could be...
Yeah, I don't know.
Of,
I did it. Here we have all the sub ones.
Okay.
All right, but to tell you the truth, I don't know where is it. But basically what we do here is that, we basically, normalize this to 0. These are differences. Mm-hmm. So changes in labor share, changes in capital intensity. Most of them follow in this quadrant goal, meaning like you increase capital intensity, labor share goes down. But I could look at that, yeah. Okay, so let me conclude then. All right, so I'm going to conclude discussing a little bit what are the implications for the macro model. We didn't go into, what we wanted to get out of this paper is, there is this issue of a measurement that we can address by looking at IPP. That explains basically everything. All right. Now, what does that imply for the macro model? I know we can think of many ways. One way, perhaps, is what Tomar was saying. Maybe we can ignore IPP somehow and think about a world without IPP. Then labor share is trendless. I like the orange line. Fine, you like the orange line. Okay, another way of looking at it is, well, first of all, there might be things that are still missing from IPP, like advertising and other stuff, so we do some robustness on that. Basically, the NIPA, if you take the numbers from McGrattan and Prescott, they treat this as an observable, a latent variable. They don't go to the data and measure IPP. Our numbers from NIPA, NIPA numbers account for 60% of the total investment that you would get, total capital stock that you would get in McGrattan and Prescott. So this is still, if you take that model, as the truth, it's still like 40% missing. Okay, so we are transparent on that. One simple way of looking at this, I'm going to get to the Cobb-Douglas now that Rachel really likes. So one simple way of looking at this is I'm going to take a very simple estimation of the long-run elasticity to see what happens to the production function. Okay, and the way we do it here is, well, we have the post-revision data. This includes IPP. Now we have a world that doesn't have IPP without IPP. That implies changes in labor share and changes in the capital output ratio. Right? So if you take the marginal product of the CES production function, in order to estimate this thing, basically you need changes in labor share, changes in capital output. This is Karabarboni's-Nyman specification. I'm not inventing anything. Okay? So what you get out of the elasticity is right now, you compute this. Elasticity is very high. Okay, you have a labor share that is going down. This implies this, and you have a capital output ratio that grows faster. That implies an elasticity higher than 1. If you look to a world without IPP, then you get to a Cobb-Douglas. The elasticity is 1. You cannot reject that it's 1. We do the composition. 75, 2010, this was the full sample, same thing. Okay? Actually, you get a number similar to Karabarboni's-Nyman if you just look at the sample. All right? At the sample, you get this. Without IPP, you get this. All right? So, incorporating IPP certainly makes the elasticity much, much higher. All right? And in a sense, Caldor facts are gone if you introduce IPP. Okay? That reflects in the shape of the production function. That doesn't mean, I'm taking a perspective of the production function that we were using before. It was not misspecified. Right? So we have a production function, we estimated it, and it delivered a sigma equal to 1, it was Cobb-Douglas. If I use the same production function, maybe not the right thing to do, but if I use the same production function, all these changes that NIPA is doing transmit into a high elasticity. Okay? That has nothing to do with the price of investment, remember. Okay?
So, Raul,
yes?
it's kind of interesting, the previous estimation. So before use of data, but this one seems like maybe delta is not the people for one.
Before what?
Before, the delta was the whole explanation between why it's so different.
Not whole, but 70%.
I mean, that's what I took
Yeah.
from the first
Yeah.
part, but here, column 4, I mean, it doesn't seem to be.
So we should flatten drop out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, so the conclusion is that hopefully I convince you that labor share goes down. It goes down more than what you think, all right? And it can entirely be explained through an accounting exercise by introduction of IPP. Okay, that gave us a little bit of something that also Fatih was discussing before in terms of inequality. If you think that IPP or ideas are a source of growth, now IPP also declines labor share. So if I want to understand the welfare implications of the decline of labor share, I need to look at this trade-off. It generates growth, but it declines labor share.